Hi, my name is Jeannie Lewis, and my presentation today will center on employee training and development. I'm sure most of us are familiar with what happens when you are hired for a specific job. Whether it be simply summer employment, internship, or a full-time position, there's certain protocol to follow. Following the corporation's job offer and your acceptance, depending on the setup and size of the company, you may be expected to attend an orientation session, which will lay the groundwork for the training phase. During the orientation, the new employee is introduced to the company, learning about its background, its future, its own responsibilities and those of its employees, and its expectations. With that behind you, as a new employee, you are now expected to complete the training necessary to perform the job you were just hired for. How important is a training program to a corporation? Extremely. When analyzing company expenditures, you will see a large portion of capital devoted towards training and development of new and current employees. In fact, according to the American Society for Training and Development, the United States corporations alone spent $109.25 billion on training and development in 2005. 90% of Fortune 500 companies have a formal training program in place, and those who are considered to be leaders in employee development offer 40 to 45 hours of training to their employees each year. You may ask, why is training necessary? After all, you were selected for your knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that made you valuable to that particular company. The fact is that even though some companies strive to hire higher performers and have sophisticated selection processes in place, there is no guarantee that the new employee will walk in on the first day of his new job with the ability to perform every task effectively. Job-specific training will most likely be necessary, and once that is complete, the new hire will be more efficient and successful in job performance. Another reason a strong training program is necessary centers around employee retention. In order to retain experienced employees, it is necessary for a company to provide additional training when changes occur throughout the company. This is especially important with the ever-changing world of technology fueling today's corporate world. The third reason for training is found in employee commitment. In order to reduce absenteeism, job dissatisfaction, and employee turnover, and to promote productivity, training must be available to further develop employees. So what exactly is a training program? By definition, training is made up of the formal procedures that a company utilizes to facilitate learning so that the resultant behavior contributes to the attainment of the company's goals and objectives. In order to decide what type and where training is necessary, a corporation will assess their training needs through 4 specific types of need analysis. Organizational analysis takes into account a company's long and short-term goals and assesses whether these goals are being met. Those objectives that are not being reached will be set up for training. Task analysis refers to analyzing the specific duties and actions that are necessary for the completion of each job. Person analysis answers the question of who specifically will need the training. This analysis takes a look at how well employees are fulfilling their duties. It takes into account performance appraisals, employees who volunteer for additional training in order to better themselves in their positions, and employee testing results. All of these areas will point employers to those in need of additional training. Lastly, corporations may look into demographic analysis. This is a relatively new process, the preceding 3 having been traditional methods. This type of analysis has come about in recent years due to certain civil rights legislation. It involves assessing the training needs of certain demographic groups, such as older employees and those with disabilities. There has been increased need for technology training for those who entered the workforce when technology was relatively new, and alternatives to visual-based training programs for those with visual disabilities. Once the training needs have been established, and before the training program can be implemented, it is important to analyze the learning context for a particular company. The context includes the instructional design, the learning principles, and how the characteristics of trainers and trainees influence the transfer of training. First of all, the instructional design of a corporation determines all the actions that will enhance and increase the new employee's learning process. The design will take into account the type of learning targeted for job performance, the environment that will support such learning, and the evaluation which will determine whether the training has or has not been successful. There are several different types of learning to consider when developing a training program. Learning itself is defined as the relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of experience or practice. Given that definition, let's take a look at some general learning principles. Active learning is, in essence, learning through the act of doing. I think we can all agree, students, that learning is easier when taking notes instead of simply listening to the professor lecture. This podcast presentation is a perfect example of active learning. We are learning through our own lectures. When implementing a training program, the amount of information to be learned must also be considered. While a task that is highly organized and succinct may be presented in one training session, one that is complex may be broken down into separate elements, each one being taught after the previous one is mastered. Another way to facilitate training is to integrate meaning into the material to be learned. There are 3 steps to follow in creating a meaningful program for trainees. First, a summary of the material highlighting key objectives should be offered. Next, the material should be combined with job-related examples to enhance the context of understanding. Third, the material should be presented in an orderly sequence to further the trainee's comprehension of the task. The fourth principle of learning revolves around the old saying, practice makes perfect. Overlearning is an important concept to utilize when training new employees. It involves giving them continued practice even after they have reached the mastery level of a task, resulting in even higher levels of learning. Overlearning produces efficiency and consistency while performing tasks. For instance, an emergency room doctor who makes life-saving decisions every day because of his overlearned behavior. The final learning concept essential to a training program is found in trainer feedback. Also called knowledge of results, trainer feedback offers 3 ways to reinforce the training framework. First, it provides information that allows trainees to make whatever adjustments may be necessary in their behaviors during training. Second, it makes the learning process more interesting for the trainees and increases their motivation to learn. Third, it leads to goal setting for improving performance. When providing feedback to the trainee, the trainer must be aware that immediacy, frequency, and sensitivity are the 3 key standards for valuable reinforcement. Next to the structural design, the personal characteristics of those involved in the training program, namely the trainer and the trainee, need to be considered. Being at the university level, I'm sure there are some of us who have participated in a peer tutoring program, whether you are the tutor or the student receiving additional help. The same principles that apply to a successful tutoring program also translate to a successful training program. For the learner, there are 2 key elements to consider when entering a program. The first being trainee readiness, which is defined as possessing the background characteristics and necessary level of interest that make learning possible. Second is the motivation to learn. Have you ever attempted to tutor a fellow student who lacks readiness or motivation? It can be very frustrating. It is the trainer's job to evaluate whether the new employee has the essential knowledge, ability, or experience to facilitate learning. And once that is determined, it is up to the trainer to provide the constructive feedback necessary for further motivation. Along with trainee characteristics, those of the trainer are just important. The key distinctions of a successful trainer include the ability to communicate specific objectives in a concise manner, possessing a strong understanding of how others learn and using that knowledge to individualize their programs, and being able to communicate well with others. The final learning principle is that which determines the success of the training program. Transfer of training is defined as the extent to which the materials, skills, or procedures learned in training are taken back to the job and used by the employee in some regular fashion. This demonstrates whether or not the knowledge gained throughout the program improves the employee's job performance. If the efficiency and value of the company is increased, the program is a success. This is an example of positive transfer and is the ultimate goal of the organization. But what happens when performance suffers a decline or negative transfer as a result of training? In that case, the program is evaluated to determine the source of the discrepancy. To reduce the causes of negative transfer, it is recommended to train new employees in a setting similar to the actual workplace, to train them in multiple contexts in order to ensure generalization of tasks, to promote the cooperation of trainers, trainees, and management, and importantly, to make clear the expectations of all the parties involved up front. And lastly, to do on-the-job maintenance programs to aid employees in performing their newly learned duties. Moving from transfer training, I will now present a look at various training techniques found in the workplace. There are several traditional methods to be presented as well as a few new programs that have come about due to the increased use of technology in the corporate world. The approach I am taking right now, simple lecture, is one of the oldest and most well-known methods utilized by companies in their training programs. This method is praised for economic reasons. Many employees can be trained at the same time. The disadvantage occurs when it comes to teaching problem solving or interpersonal skills, and as there is usually a set time limit on such sessions, there is little focus on practice, overlearning, or feedback. On-the-job training is one of the most used methods and probably one that everyone is familiar with. This technique's success depends highly on the reliability of the trainer. More companies have seen success when they take the time to put together training teams based on those employees who show high aptitude in teaching and interpersonal skills. They coach these employees in proper instruction methods and provide additional benefits for their work as trainers. Pairing well-trained trainers with new employees provides the basis for a successful training program. Self-directed techniques such as programmed instruction and computer-assisted instruction have been used widely by corporations for many years. Based on the learning principles of feedback, distributed practice, and reinforcement, the clear advantage to this type of program is that the learner can work at his own pace. This being said, further research on these methods is still needed as studies have indicated no superiority in learning or retention in these groups as compared with training control groups. Work simulators are designed to be as realistic to the work setting as possible so that the trainees can convey the knowledge and skills gained to a true situation. Simulators are useful as there are some professions where the real equipment necessary for training would be too costly or pose too much danger to the individual. Effective simulators operate on two principles: physical and psychological fidelity. In other words, their ability to imitate the operation of real-world equipment as well as how well they activate the behavioral processes necessary to complete the real-world job. Now that I've described several traditional methods of delivery, it is now important to acknowledge some methods of technology-based training. One of the fastest growing techniques seen in training utilizes audiovisual or multimedia presentations. On par with the effectiveness of traditional lectures, audiovisual presentations have a slight advantage in that the material to be learned can be replayed, paused, and stopped to demonstrate proper approaches to certain tasks. Distance learning, one of the key concepts utilizing in the taking of this class, makes use of the internet to provide training to a group of people in different locations at the same time. The advantages to the system are clear. Distance learning enables the efficient use of instructors, places more responsibility on the learner to progress, and demonstrates a clear cost savings to other programs. The last option to be discussed is that of e-learning. Again, using the internet, employees are able to sort through web-based information, performing the training at home or in the office. The information is easy to store and keep updated and is set up for multiple trainees to share through web-based discussion groups, much like our Blackboard system. The techniques I've shared thus far have been used for training in a variety of jobs, but what about those which are specific to developing trainees and promoting leadership skills? Employee development is the responsibility of the Human Resources Department of any corporation, and there are several approaches that can be taken. This type of training again begins with the orientation process, which I discussed in the beginning of this presentation. The orientation step is important as it helps with the socialization skills of employees. Developing a clear understanding of the company's principles and values helps new employees form their own impressions of the company and understand how they can promote efficiency and reach expectation levels set by administration. Once a training program is established, the HR department can utilize techniques such as coaching, behavior modeling, business simulations, and corporate universities to promote employee development. Coaching is a one-on-one collaborative relationship in which an individual provides performance-related guidance to an employee. This motivational technique serves to provide guidance by clearly communicating performance expectations and outcome and by offering improvement suggestions. Coaches help employees analyze problem solving and enhance job performance. They also provide challenges to inspire employees to reach their full potential. Behavior modeling focuses on developing interpersonal skills. With this technique, role play is used to provide training in situations such as socialization of new employees, motivation of poor employees, helping employees overcome their resistance to change, and handling problem employees. Business simulations are used to imitate specific situations in which managers are asked to make decisions based on make-believe scenarios. While this game-like approach can be useful as it leads to new idea creation and promotion, it can backfire if the participants are solely consumed by the competitive nature of the technique. A final resource being used by corporations is that of the corporate university. Used by such companies as Motorola, McDonald's, and Xerox, these universities are a long-term investment and provide a source of continuous learning to their employees, emphasizing the importance of the management of knowledge. I'm sure you can all appreciate the importance of a solid training program to today's corporation. After looking at the separate training needs, the principles of learning, and the techniques that facilitate these principles, it is safe to say that corporate training is a necessary expenditure to further enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of a company's future goals.